Adam Schiff had not spoken in 14 seconds, and in that exact moment, his carefully crafted narrative began to collapse on live television. The Senate lapel pin on his $3,000 suit jacket had slipped 4 degrees off vertical. His right hand was no longer adjusting it, his right hand was holding it, the way a drowning man holds a piece of driftwood. Not because the driftwood will save him, but because letting go is worse. Across the aisle, a country lawyer from Madisonville, Louisiana, age 70, looked at him over a pair of reading glasses. "Senator, I'm going to ask you one more time, and then I'm going to stop asking because I think the 4 million Americans watching this hearing have figured out the answer." The folder in front of John Neely Kennedy was open to page 7. Page 7 was a Fannie Mae refinance affidavit dated April 19, 2011. Adam Schiff's signature was at the bottom. Schiff said nothing. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what you are about to hear is the morning. A country lawyer with 4 manila folders walked into a Senate hearing room, listened to Adam Schiff, insult him for 4 straight minutes, and then over the next 52 minutes, methodically, dismantled every falsehood that man had told the American people for the previous 8 years on live television with receipts. Let's go back 53 minutes to the moment Adam Schiff made the worst mistake any prosecutor can make. He thought he was the prosecutor, not a glorified Bayou bookkeeper's office. Adam Schiff was 3 minutes into his opening remarks. The Senate lapel pin on his navy suit was perfectly centered. The branded sparkling water sat untouched. He had reviewed the witness list on his flight from LAX the night before. There were no names on it that worried him. I would gently remind my friend that the work of this committee is not bait shop work. We are addressing matters of constitutional gravity, so I would ask the senator from Louisiana with respect to remember that this is the United States Senate. The Democratic side of the dais smiled. A staffer in the second row gave a small thumbs up. What Schiff did not know was that the country lawyer from Madisonville had spent the previous evening in a third-floor office of the Russell Senate Office Building with 2 staffers from the Senate Banking Committee, 3 printed reports from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and a manila folder. They had finished assembling the folder at 1:17 p.m. He had taken it home, read it, made 1 phone call that lasted 6 minutes, and gone to bed. The folder was now on the lower bench in front of him. Schiff was not finished, and while I respect the senator's law degree from a fine state university, I would gently remind him that not everyone here learned constitutional law from a textbook published before the Voting Rights Act. Schiff sat back. The communications director in the wings nodded once slowly, the way a director nods at the end of a take. Across the aisle, Senator John Neely Kennedy did not respond. He picked up his glasses. He removed them. He took a small white cloth handkerchief from his jacket pocket. He wiped the right lens, then the left. He folded the handkerchief into a smaller square. He placed it back in the pocket. He put the glasses back on. He picked up his bottle of water. Standard hearing room plastic. No brand. He twisted the cap. He took a small sip. He twisted the cap back on. He set the bottle down 2 inches to the left of where it had been. He picked up the manila folder. He opened it. Page 4. He held it open with his left hand. He did not say anything yet. 12 seconds passed. Kennedy turned the microphone toward himself. "Senator Schiff, thank you kindly. I appreciate the welcome." The drawl was thick. It was not performance thick, it was Madisonville thick. "You know where I come from? My daddy used to run a little bait shop down by the Chafuncta River, sold worms mostly. He used to say something to me growing up. He said, 'Son, when a man spends the first 3 minutes of a conversation telling you how dumb you are, he's about to do something real dumb himself.'" The drawl picked up its hat. I always thought that was pretty good advice. The Democratic side of the dais smiled, but slower this time. A senator 3 seats down from Schiff laughed once, then caught himself. Kennedy did not look up from the folder. "Senator, I'd like to ask you a few questions about a property in Potomac, Maryland." The smiles stopped. Schiff's right hand moved for the first time that morning toward the lapel pin. Page 4 was a photocopy, black and white, slightly tilted on the page from where the original had been laid on the scanner. At the top, in the standard sans serif font that Fannie Mae has used since Reagan was in office, were the words "Uniform Residential Loan Application Refinance." Kennedy held it up so the C-SPAN robotic camera could find it. The camera found it. The producer in the C-SPAN truck parked outside the Hart Building said the word Zoom into his headset, and the signature at the bottom of page 4 filled 12 million American television screens at the same moment. The signature said Adam B. Schiff. "That's your signature, ain't it, Senator?" The polish in Schiff's voice was still there. At this point, it would be gone by minute 18, but at minute 12 it was holding. Senator Kennedy, that document is being mischaracterized. The FHFA referral is part of a politically motivated "I didn't ask you" about the FHFA referral, Senator. The drawl was gentle, almost neighborly, the way you ask a man if he wants help carrying groceries. "I asked you about your signature. Is that your signature or ain't it?" Schiff looked at his communications director in the wings. The communications director, a woman named Sarah Lynn, whose LinkedIn profile listed her as Senior VP of Strategic Communications at a Beltway firm with offices in 3 cities, was already on her phone. She was texting. She was not looking at her boss. That was the first sign. "Senator, the document speaks for itself. In a courtroom, that's called fishing for an objection. In a Senate hearing with 4 million people watching it, called something else." A reporter in the second row, working for a left-of-center magazine that had defended Schiff for 6 straight years, wrote a single sentence in his notebook. The sentence was, "He didn't deny the signature." Kennedy did not press it. He didn't need to. "Yes, sir, it does." The page came down. The drawl turned over a new card. "And what it says is that on April 19, 2011, you swore under federal penalty that a house in Maryland was your primary residence." He produced a second photocopy. This one had the seal of Los Angeles County at the top, the same kind of standard sans serif font, the same kind of declaratory bold language. "This here is a Los Angeles County Assessor's homeowner exemption form. Same year, 2011. Property: a condominium in Burbank, California. The form requires the applicant to certify that the listed property is his primary residence in the state of California. You signed this one too, Senator." A beat. April 28, 2011. A second beat. 9 days after the Maryland one. The press section had gone very still. 2 of the reporters in the second row were now writing the same number. The number was 9. In the wings, Sarah Lynn had stopped texting. She was now holding the phone at her side screen, down the way people hold phones when they've realized that whatever they were about to text is no longer the most urgent thing in the room. In Madisonville, Senator, when a fella tells 2 banks the same thing on 2 different days, we call it being polite. The drawl picked up a half step, telling 2 banks different things in the same month that asks something else. A third beat. It's called 18 U.S. Code Section 1014, false statement to a financial institution up to 30 years federal. There was a small noise from the press section. Not a laugh, not a gasp. Something between the two. The sound a journalist makes when they realize the lead of their own article has just changed in front of them. Kennedy did not stop to enjoy it. He never enjoyed things in front of cameras. He produced 3 more photocopies, one after the other, the way a man at a kitchen table deals out cards. "I got 5 of these, Senator. 2009, 2011, 2012, 2013, plus the original 2003 purchase. Same property, same certification, same signature. 5 Fannie Mae loans." The folder closed. Senator Fannie Mae's own Financial Violations Division, and these ain't my words. These are theirs. On official letterhead dated May 2025, use the phrase, "a sustained pattern of possible occupancy misrepresentation." That's the federal mortgage insurer of the United States, Senator. They've been investigating you. The director of the FHFA, Mr. William P. Yes, a Trump appointee, but also the man whose actual job is mortgage deception, sent a legal referral to the Attorney General, cited 4 federal statutes: wire deception, mail deception, bank deception, false statements to a financial institution. That's the legal code, Senator, that ain't an op-ed. This was the moment Adam Schiff began to do the math. He had done it before on the flight from LAX to Reagan National the night before, somewhere over Nebraska. He had done it again that morning in the back of the Lincoln Town car the campaign had sent. He had done it once more in the green room before walking into the hearing. Each time, the math had come out the same. The statute of limitations on Section 1014 was 10 years. The last false statement on a Fannie Mae form was 2013. 10 years from 2013 was 2023, and we were past 2023, and therefore the legal exposure on the false statement statute was time-barred. He had built his entire defense around that math. What he had not factored into the math was that the legal referral didn't have to result in conviction to ruin him. It only had to be read aloud on live television by a country lawyer with a manila folder and 4 million viewers. The math sitting in his head at minute 15 of the hearing was suddenly a much smaller comfort than it had been over Nebraska. And while you were certifying to Fannie Mae that Maryland was your primary residence, getting a lower interest rate on 5 separate refinancings, since primary residence loans cost less than secondary residence loans, you was also claiming a California homeowner's tax exemption on your Burbank condo. The draw looked up for the first time. It made eye contact with Schiff across the room. Senator, you know how much that California exemption was worth. About $7,000 a year off your 1% property tax for about 10 years. The math hung in the hearing room like a balloon nobody wanted to pop. That's $70,000, Senator, of California taxpayer money going into your pocket while you was telling Maryland banks the opposite thing. In the wings, Sarah Lynn's phone, the one she had been holding screened down at her side, slipped out of her hand and hit the marble floor of the heart-building hallway with a small, flat sound. 2 cameramen heard it. One of them kept rolling. The other looked at her. She did not pick the phone up. That was the second sign. Now, Senator, I've been a lawyer about as long as you've been a lawyer, and I want to be fair about something. The drawl had a new register now. Conversational, almost regretful, like a country doctor explaining a diagnosis to a patient who was probably going to be fine, but probably wasn't going to be fine the way he hoped to be fine. There are situations where a member of Congress legitimately occupies 2 homes year-round. We all got to be in Washington, and we all got to be home in our state. The Federal Mortgage Code understands that. There's a thing called occupancy designation. You declare which is primary, which is secondary, and you pay according rates. Primary gets a lower interest rate, secondary gets a higher one. That's the deal. The whole financial system depends on people telling the truth on that one form. A pause. You didn't pick one, Senator. The drawl was quiet enough that the C-SPAN audio engineer turned the gain up 2 notches. You picked both, for 10 years, on 5 separate Fannie Mae loans, while at the same time telling the state of California under penalty of perjury on a different form that California was your only one. A small smile brief, not quite cruel, not quite kind. The federal mortgage system, Senator, ain't got room for a man who wants 2 primaries. It's like asking the IRS for 2 sets of dependents on the same kid. The IRS frowns on that, Senator. So does Fannie Mae. The press section did not laugh. They had learned by minute 15 that Kennedy's jokes were not always jokes, they were tow trucks. They picked up the body of the argument and dragged it forward. And the savings, Senator. The financial benefit of being classified primary instead of secondary, according to industry analysts who looked at your specific loan terms, came out to between $40.00 and $60.00 interest savings over the life of those loans, plus the $70.00 California tax exemptions. So we are talking, conservatively, somewhere north of $100, 0 inches, total benefit going into the pocket of a sitting member of Congress across 10 years from 2 different state systems, both of which are legally entitled to the truth. Schiff's voice came back. The polish was thinner. He was no longer reading from prepared notes. He was reaching for a defense the way a man reaches for a railing in a dark hallway. Senator Kennedy, my California and Maryland addresses have been listed as primary residences for loan purposes because they are both occupied throughout the year and to distinguish them from a vacation property. Senator, with respect, a single finger up that ain't an answer. That's a press release. The Democratic side of the dais did not smile this time. The senator 3 seats down from Schiff, the one who had laughed once at minute 4 and caught himself, was now studying the ceiling tiles. He had identified in the past 45 seconds the tile directly above him and was reading the manufacturer's stamp. The Federal Mortgage Code don't say primary residence is wherever you happen to be sleeping that month. It says primary singular one. The whole point of the word primary is there can only be one. You're a lawyer, Senator, Hell, you're a Harvard lawyer. You know what primary means? The drawl was patient. In English, primary means one. One. Uno. You can have a primary and a secondary. You cannot have a primary and another primary. That's like saying you got a wife and another wife. We got a word for that in Louisiana too, Senator, but I won't use it on television. The press section laughed once brief. Then somebody, a producer in the back working for a network that was supposed to be sympathetic to Schiff, said audibly, "Oh my God." The MSNBC reporter in the front row did not turn around to look at him. Her face had stopped moving 30 seconds ago. So either you committed mortgage deception, which carries up to 30 years federal, or you retelling me on live television that a Harvard lawyer who ran the proceedings against a president of the United States doesn't understand the word primary. The drawl folded its hands. Which is it? Senator Schiff said nothing. He did not look at his communications director. He did not look at the senator 3 seats down. He did not look at the press section. He looked at the manila folder on the lower bench. The folder was closed now. It was the only object in the room that was not at that moment looking back at him. Hit that like button right now, because what just happened was a Louisiana country lawyer just nailed a sitting U.S. senator to the federal mortgage code on live television. Comment Bayou Bookkeeper if you've ever seen a possum bite back. Subscribe because the next bomb has nothing to do with houses. It's about a phone call with a president of the United States. The manila folder slid to the side of the bench. A red folder appeared in its place. But Senator, I didn't come up here from Louisiana to talk about a house in Maryland. I came up here to talk about something you said you saw with your own eyes, and then said you didn't, and then said you did, and then said you couldn't have known. A small drawl smile. I got 3 more folders, Senator. The red folder, when it opened, smelled faintly of leather. The label on the inside flap was in Kennedy's own handwriting, 3 letters and 6 numbers, HPSCI 92619. In the press section 3, reporters wrote down the date. Senator, on September 26, 2019. You was the chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You opened a public hearing. There was a transcript. There was televised coverage. You said, and I'm quoting you exactly, quote, "I have the call right here." Then you read what you called the call. The drawl found Schiff's eyes again. You remember what you said, the president said. There were 2 extra beats of preparation in Schiff's voice now. Anyone who had watched him in committee for the past 8 years would have heard them. They were the beats that arrived when Schiff knew the question was coming, knew the answer was bad, and was choosing among 3 rehearsed responses in his head. Senator Kennedy, my opening statement on that day was characterized at the time as a parody which, at the time, Senator, the drawl tightened by a quarter step, just enough that the press section noticed. The MSNBC reporter in the front row, the one whose face had stopped moving 30 seconds into the mortgage bomb, wrote a single word in her notebook. The word was, "uh-oh," or "after you got caught." A small flush appeared on Schiff's neck just above the shirt collar. The C-SPAN robotic camera, programmed to track skin temperature changes for award show coverage and not for Senate hearings, caught it anyway. The producer in the C-SPAN truck parked outside said the word closer into his headset, and 12 million American television screens watched a single drop of perspiration form hold and break loose at the side of Schiff's neck. It rolled 1.5 inches down before the shirt collar absorbed it. It was characterized as such in the statement itself, Senator. I was making a point about the president's intent, not quoting verbatim. A page lifted on the lower bench. I'm going to read what you said, Senator. You said, quote, "I have a favor I want from you, though. I have a favor I want you to do for me." A beat. That was supposed to be Donald Trump talking, wasn't it, Senator? The dramatic device? And then you said, "I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good." A second beat. That was the president too, according to you. Wasn't it, Senator? The underlying substance. And then I want you to make up damaging information on my political opponent, end quote. The drawl was very quiet now. The C-SPAN audio engineer turned the gain up another notch. He had now turned it up 3 times in 20 minutes, which was 3 times more than he had ever turned it up in any Senate judiciary hearing in his one-year career. You read that into the official congressional record, Senator, on national television, as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, with top-secret clearance. A small sound from the press section. The same not quite laugh, not quite gasp, The Atlantic reporter in the third row was now writing in his lap. He had stopped pretending to write on his open notebook. Now here is the part of this story that always tickled me, Senator. The drawl picked up its hat. You know, when the actual transcript of the actual phone call was declassified by the White House, a silence in the room. September 25, 2019. One day before you read your version into the record. 2 beats. So you had the real one, Senator. It was sitting on your desk, and you read a different one out loud on purpose. This was the moment the senator 3 seats down from Schiff, the one who had been studying ceiling tiles, gave up and looked directly at his phone. He was not on his phone. He was looking at the black screen of his phone, which had locked itself because it would have been visibly improper to scroll while a colleague was being dismantled on live television. But the black screen of the locked phone was at this exact moment the most interesting thing in the room that was not on the lower bench. On June 21, 2023, the drawl continued. The United States House of Representatives, by a vote of 213 to 209, formally censured you. The resolution said, quote, "Representative Schiff purposely deceived his committee, Congress, and the American people. That ain't my opinion, Senator. That's the United States House of Representatives on the record." A small drawl smile. You're the 25th lawmaker in American history to be censured. 25th senator out of how many tens of thousands? You're in some real exclusive company there. This was the moment Adam Schiff stood up. He pushed his chair back 2 inches. He set both hands on the table. The Harvard Law graduate, the one who had graduated cum laude in 1985, who had clerked for a federal judge, who had served as an assistant U.S. attorney in Los Angeles, who had personally won the conviction of an FBI agent for covert activities, he woke up. The California senator woke up. The lead proceedings manager, who had once held a press conference on the floor of the United States Senate and called the day a turning point in American history, he woke up too. His voice rose. Senator Kennedy, that censure was a political act. His finger jabbed once into the table. The branded sparkling water bottle vibrated. It was driven by Donald Trump's allies in the House. It carried no legal weight. It imposed no penalty. 20 Republicans initially voted to table the motion before Congresswoman Luna stripped out the $16 million fine to get her votes. That is not a verdict, Senator. That is theater. The progressive press section, which had been quiet for 19 minutes, clapped once, then twice. Then a producer in the back of the room, whose company had been paying for the privilege of running a Schiff-friendly evening show for 6 straight years, stood up and clapped with both hands above his head. Someone said audibly, "Yes." A young woman in a Schiff campaign cap, who had been sitting in the third row holding her breath since the Maryland affidavit, exhaled and clapped. And while we rediscussing accountability, Senator, let's discuss what Donald Trump actually did on that phone call. He pressured a foreign leader to manufacture damaging information on a political opponent. He withheld military aid from a country at war with Russia. He betrayed our allies. He betrayed our intelligence community. He betrayed the Constitution itself. I stand by every word of that opening statement, Senator, because the substance was true, even if the literary device was a parody. His voice carried up to the chandeliers. The MSNBC reporter mouthed in real time, "That's the soundbite. And if you, sir, are now using a Senate hearing to relitigate the proceedings of a man who has been impeached twice, indicted 4 times, and convicted on 34 severe charges, then perhaps the bookkeeping in this room is exactly where it belongs." The progressive section was on its feet. 15 full seconds. For 15 seconds, the hearing room belonged to Adam Schiff. The cable producers in 3 trucks parked outside the Hart Building started clipping. The young Schiff staffer in the back row, who had a master's degree in political communications from Georgetown and had practiced this exact rhetorical maneuver in graduate seminars, recorded the moment vertically on her phone for Instagram. 2 of the Democratic senators on the dais nodded. One of them muttered, "Adam, Adam, Adam," under his breath, the way a coach mutters the name of a fighter winning round 8 on the cards. Across the room on the lower bench, Kennedy did not interrupt. He did not gesture. He did not move. He did not even close the red folder. He sat with his hands folded on the manila one, the way a country lawyer sits when he has been to enough trials to know that some witnesses, given the chance, will rest the prosecutor's case for him. The applause crested. It peaked. It began to fall. When it had fallen far enough that the C-SPAN audio engineer could turn the gain back down to its baseline setting, Kennedy spoke. The drawl was gone. It did not vanish. It was put away carefully the way a man puts a hat on a hook by the door, knowing he will need it again in a few minutes. The voice that came out of the microphone now was a voice nobody in that hearing room had heard before. Not Schiff. Not Schiff's communications director. Not the day. Not the Atlantic reporter in the third row who had covered Kennedy on a profile assignment 3 years earlier and had concluded in print that the Louisiana drawl was almost certainly performance. The voice that arrived now was the voice of John Neely Kennedy, J.D., University of Virginia School of Law, magna cum laude 1977, postgraduate diploma in Law and Government Magdalen College Oxford University 1973, Louisiana State Treasurer 2000 to 2017. The voice was federal courtroom precise. The accent had not vanished, the accent had been put on a hook. Senator Schiff. In Schiff's head, somewhere behind the prepared rebuttals and the rehearsed sound bites, a small calculation began that he had not run on the flight from LAX, or in the Lincoln Town car, or in the green room. The calculation was this: he prepared this. He prepared this last night. The Oxford voice continued. Article 1, Section 5. Clause 2 of the United States Constitution gives each chamber of Congress the authority to punish its members for disorderly behavior. The censure of a sitting member is one of 3 formal disciplinary mechanisms available to the chamber: censure, reprimand, expulsion. It is not theater, it is constitutional discipline. The vote was 213 to 209. The resolution remains on the permanent record of the United States House of Representatives. It uses the word purposely deceived. A pause. 1 beat. That is not a literary device, Senator. That is a finding. Then the drawl came back, slowly like a hat being put back on. The Oxford voice slid quietly out of the room, and Madisonville walked back in. Now you can call it political, you can call it theater, you can call it whatever you like. But what you can do, Senator, is read a fake transcript of a presidential phone call into the congressional record on national television, get censured for it by the United States House, and then sit here 4 years later and tell a country lawyer from Louisiana that the censure don't count. The eyes found Schiff's N. It counts, Senator. It counted then, it counts now, and it'll count when the historians sit down and write what kind of chairman you was. The applause was gone. The progressive section had sometime in the last 40 seconds sat back down. None of them remembered doing it. The young Schiff staffer with the Georgetown master's degree had stopped recording. The producer in the back of the room had turned to a colleague and was in a low voice asking him whether he had read the recently declassified Atkinson testimony. And 15 seconds. Schiff had won 15 seconds. He had then lost the next 90. Comment possum, bit back if you have ever in your life seen a senator from Louisiana drop a Harvard Law accent on a Harvard Law graduate. Subscribe, because the next bomb is about a phone call Schiff made before the proceedings to a person he claimed he didn't know while he was lying about it on television. The red folder closed. It made the same small definite sound on the wood as the manila one had. 2 folders stacked 2 to go. A navy folder appeared on the bench. The navy folder was thicker than the other 2. Anyone in the press section who had spent more than a year covering Schiff knew just from the thickness what was inside. The Atlantic reporter in the third row, who had been an early defender of the proceedings in 2019, set his pen down on his notebook quietly. He did not pick it back up for the next 11 minutes. Senator, you remember Mr. Michael Atkinson Schiff had sat back down during the Oxford voice interlude. His right hand had returned to the lapel pin, the way a man's hand returns to a railing in a hallway he is no longer sure of. The pin was still centered on his lapel, but it was, as the C-SPAN feed had quietly documented for the past 4 minutes, no longer perfectly centered. It had slipped 2 degrees off vertical. Senator Kennedy, the Inspector General, was an Obama appointee. Yes, sir, I remember. I just want to make sure the folks watching at home remember it too, because this story works better when you know whose man Mr. Atkinson was. The drawl opened the folder. Mr. Atkinson took a whistleblower complaint on August 12, 2019. The complaint was about a phone call between President Trump and the President of Ukraine. The call was on July 25th. The complaint was filed 18 days later. The complainant was a CIA analyst whose name has been all over the public record for 5 years now. The eyes found Schiff again. Senator, before that whistleblower filed his complaint with Mr. Atkinson, before he filled out the official form signed under penalty of perjury, did he or did he not have prior contact with members of your staff? Senator Kennedy, the whistleblower's identity remains protected by federal statute. I didn't ask for his name, Senator. The drawl was patient the way a doctor is patient, with a man who keeps trying to leave the examining room. I asked whether he talked to your staff before he filed the complaint. Schiff looked at his communications director. The communications director, Sarah Lynn of the dropped phone, was looking at her phone again. The phone was face up this time. She was scrolling. She was not scrolling for fun, she was scrolling for something that was not coming. Senator Kennedy, my committee staff received a routine inquiry from someone with concerns about a possible matter for the Inspector General. We followed all proper protocols. Routine. Senator A paused just enough. Was it routine that 2 weeks before that complaint was filed, actually the day after the Trump-Zelensky phone call, your committee hired a fellow named Sean Misko? The room which had been quiet became something quieter than that. In the wings, Sarah Lynn stopped scrolling. She put the phone down on the railing. She did not pick it back up for the rest of the hearing. Mr. Misko, according to public records reported by the Washington Examiner, was a former National Security Council aide. He worked at the NSC in the Obama administration. He worked there alongside the very same person who later filed the whistleblower complaint. They were colleagues. Some folks who worked with them said they were close. One former White House official used the word bro-like. A small drawl, smile, not cruel, not kind, tired. You hired Mr. Misko on July 26, 2019. The Trump-Zelensky phone call was on July 25th. That's a one-day gap, Senator. 1 day. And the man you hired on day 2 happened to be the former roommate of the man who filed the complaint that triggered the proceedings against the President of the United States. The drawl found Schiff's eyes one more time. That's quite the coincidence, ain't it, Senator? Senator Kennedy, Mr. Misko, is a qualified national security professional with extensive. He's also the fellow who, according to 2 former White House officials, speaking on the record to Real Clear Investigations, was overheard in the West Wing in February 2017, 2 weeks after President Trump took office, discussing how to remove the commander-in-chief. 2 weeks in. That story's been on the public record for years, Senator. A drawl beat. You ever read it? A tighter pause. That report is unverified. Real Clear Investigations is the same outlet that broke the Hunter Biden laptop authentication. Senator, they re-not the National Enquirer. 2 White House officials on the record about a man you hired 1 day after the call he later flagged. The MSNBC reporter in the front row was no longer holding her face still, she was now visibly grimacing. 3 rows behind her, a producer for a podcast that had spent 4 straight years calling Schiff the conscience of the Constitution, whispered to a colleague that he was going to have to call the host that afternoon. Now here's the part that always made me scratch my head, Senator. The drawl picked up a 4th photocopy. On September 17, 2019, you went on national television. You went on MSNBC. The host asked you whether your committee had any contact with the whistleblower. You said, and this is on tape, anybody can pull it up, quote, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We would like to." A pause. That was a Tuesday. A longer pause. 2 weeks later, on October 2nd, the New York Times reported. Not Fox News, Senator, the New York Times reported that the whistleblower had in fact been in contact with your staff before he filed the complaint. Your office then issued a statement acknowledging that contact. So either you didn't know what your own staff was doing, Senator, or you went on national television and lied to the American people. A small drawl shrugged, almost regretful. Pick one. Schiff's hand, the one on the lapel pin, it was visibly tighter now. The pin had slipped from 2 degrees off vertical to 4. It was not noticeable from the dais, it was very noticeable on the C-SPAN feed. The producer in the C-SPAN truck parked outside the Hart Building said the word pin into his headset, and the camera switched briefly to a close-up of the pin alone. The pin caught the light, in a way it had not caught the light at minute 4. Senator Kennedy. The contact between my staff and the complainant was procedural and entirely consistent with. Mr. Atkinson testified before your committee on October 4, 2019, Senator. The drawl was lower now, under oath. He said the whistleblower did not disclose on the official complaint form that he had already contacted members of your staff. That form requires disclosure of, quote, other actions you have taken on your disclosure under penalty of perjury, Mr. Atkinson said. And I'm quoting your own committee transcript. Had we known of the prior contact, it would have been an additional matter for our review. The eyes found Schiff again. That ain't T. Devin Nunes talking, Senator. That ain't Donald Trump. That's an Obama appointee telling your committee that something didn't add up. A drawl pause. And here's the part I keep coming back to, Senator. The voice dropped another half step. The C-SPAN audio engineer turned the gain up for the fourth time in the morning. The whistleblower complaint that triggered the proceedings against a sitting president of the United States, the document that launched a full Senate trial, dominated 3 months of news coverage, and consumed the entire bandwidth of American politics in the fall of 2019. That complaint was based on hearsay. Mr. Atkinson confirmed it under oath. The whistleblower wasn't on the call. He didn't hear the call. He had read a readout. He had talked to people who had read a readout. He had then talked to your staff, and then he had filed a complaint without disclosing that he damn talked to your staff. A beat. 16 of the 18 witnesses, your committee called Senator, gave hearsay testimony. 16 out of 18. The 2 who weren't hearsay couldn't establish the central allegation. The actual transcript of the actual phone call, once it was declassified, didn't say what the whistleblower said it said. The President of the United States declassified it himself. Anybody could read it. And anybody who did read it learned that the words you read aloud on September 26th were not in the actual call. In Schiff's head, somewhere behind the rapid mental Rolodex of prepared rebuttals, none of which fit the question being asked, a second calculation began. The first calculation over Nebraska had been about statutes of limitations. This one was simpler. He has all of it. Everything I have ever said, he has all of it. The mouth opened, closed, opened. Senator, the Atkinson testimony has been mischaracterized by who, Senator? The drawl was light, conversational, the kind of voice a man uses when he asks his neighbor if he wants help carrying groceries. 2 of the reporters in the second row wrote down the same single word in their notebooks. The word was whom, by the New York Times, by Mr. Atkinson, by the Washington Examiner, by 2 former White House officials, by me. A small, tired drawl smile. 'Cause one of y'all is mischaracterizing something here, and it ain't he the Inspector General. A pause. Then the drawl did something it had not done all morning. It dropped 1 full register. The folksy was still there. The Madisonville was still there. But the politeness, the senator with respect politeness, was gone. The voice that arrived now was the voice of a man who had spent 43 minutes treating Adam Schiff like a colleague, and had decided, somewhere between Sean Misko's hire date and the September 17th MSNBC tape, that he was done with that. Senator, let me say what I think you don't want me to say. I think you lied. I think you lied to a national television audience on September 17, 2019. I think you lied when you read a fake transcript into the congressional record on September 26th. I think you lied for 4 years to anyone who put a microphone in front of your face. And I think you knew you was lying the whole time. Now you can object to my framing. You can call it partisan. You can have your communications director put out a statement after this hearing calling me a right-wing distraction. But the American people watching this on their television at home, the ones whose taxes paid for the $32 million investigation that came out of your lies, they are entitled to hear somebody just one time on live broadcast say the block. Word out loud. A drawl beat. You lied, Senator. To them. For years. The hearing room did not move. Sarah Lynn in the wings had her hand over her mouth. The MSNBC reporter in the front row was looking at her shoes. 2 senators on the dais had stopped breathing audibly. The C-SPAN audio engineer parked outside in the truck leaned back in his chair and said the word Jesus into his coffee cup. Schiff said nothing. The press section did not laugh. They had been laughing 40 minutes earlier. The MSNBC reporter, who had sat in this same hearing room 6 years before during the Trump proceedings, had spent that entire hearing taking notes the way an apostle takes notes. Today, she was not taking notes at all. Her hands were in her lap. Her face was pointed at the floor about 3 feet in front of her shoes. Something had changed in the room and nobody had told the press. And this was what the Atlantic reporter in the third row was beginning to understand in real time, with a sensation he would later describe to a friend over drinks as learning that the priest had been the thief the press had been told. The press had been told for 4 years, some of them had simply chosen not to listen. If you are watching this and you ain't subscribed yet, you're about to miss the moment a country lawyer brings the Steele dossier into a Senate hearing room and asks Adam Schiff to sit there while 3 of the men whose lives he helped destroy walk up to the witness microphone. Comment 3 witnesses if you want to see this. Hit subscribe, don't move. The Navy folder closed. 3 folders stacked on the lower bench, 1 to go. A black folder appeared. The black folder did not open right away. For the first time, in 51 minutes, the lower bench was still. Kennedy did not lift the cover. He did not pull a page. He looked at the folder. He looked at Schiff. He looked very briefly at the back of the hearing room. The cameras had been pointed at the dais all morning. They had not yet found the third row from the back on the left side, where 3 men had been sitting since 8:45 a.m. The Atlantic reporter sitting in the second row had walked past those 3 men on his way in and not registered them. 2 of them had been holding coffee cups. 1 of them had been reading a copy of the Wall Street Journal. None of them was wearing a press credential. None of them was wearing a witness pin. The Republican chairman from Iowa had been told about them at 6:45 that morning. Nobody else had, Senator Kennedy said. The drawl was steady now. Not folksy, not Oxford, something in between. The voice of a man who has reached the part of the trial where he no longer has to perform. On March 20, 2017, you was the ranking minority member of the House Intelligence Committee. You delivered an opening statement at a public hearing. The hearing was televised. Tens of millions of Americans watched it. And in your opening statement, Senator, you read out loud into the official congressional record of the United States multiple specific claims from a document called the Steele dossier. The black folder opened. Inside the folder on top was a single photograph. It was an 8x10 blow-up of a single page from the dossier. The page had been redacted in places. The redactions were old. The dossier itself was older. You remember reading those claims, Senator Kennedy. The dossier was a topic of public discussion at the time, and it was. Senator, it was a topic, but there's a difference between a topic and evidence. You presented those claims as evidence. You said on television on ABC News in March 2017, quote, "There is more than circumstantial evidence of conspiracy." The drawl produced a second photograph. This one was a screenshot, a still, from a television interview. Schiff in the frame, mid-sentence, mouth slightly open. You said it on CNN. You said it on MSNBC. You said it at the Aspen Institute. You said it on Meet the Press. You said it for 2.5 years. Always the same phrase, more than circumstantial. The drawl looked up. Senator, did you ever produce that evidence, son? The room had gone by degrees into something deeper than silence. The press section was a row of unmoving heads. The dais was a row of unmoving heads. The producers in the cable trucks parked outside the Hart Building had stopped giving directions to their camera operators. The C-SPAN audio engineer was leaning forward in his chair, both hands on his console, listening with his whole face the way a man listens to a confession. Anywhere, in any hearing, in any deposition, in any classified briefing, in any committee report, did you ever, one time in 2.5 years of saying it on television, produce the more than circumstantial evidence, Senator Kennedy, the Mueller investigation? The Mueller investigation found no criminal conspiracy, Senator. The drawl was lower now. The C-SPAN gain was already at maximum. Cost the American taxpayer $32 million. 2.5 years of news cycles. And the conclusion in writing, from Special Counsel Robert Mueller, a Republican senator, a former FBI director appointed by a Republican president, was that the investigation, quote, did not establish coordination or conspiracy, a drawl beat. Now, Mr. Horowitz, Department of Justice Inspector General, another nonpartisan figure, he issued a report in December 2019. He found 17 significant errors and omissions in the FISA applications used to surveil Carter Page the very FISA applications that relied on the Steele dossier. He testified, and this is on the record, that the FBI had already fired Christopher Steele as a confidential source for lying before the FISA renewals, and nobody told the FISA court. The eyes found Schiff. Mr. Durham Special Counsel John Durham issued his final report in May 2023, concluded the FBI had no proper basis for launching the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. None. The dossier was, in his words, unverified and unreliable. The primary subsource, a fellow named Igor Danchenko, was charged with making false statements to federal investigators. A single typed sheet came out of the folder. The drawl held it up. "Senator, this is your committee's Democratic memo. February 24, 2018. You was the senior Democrat." The memo says, and I'm going to read this slow because I want every American watching to hear it. Quote, FBI and DOJ officials did not abuse the FISA process, did not omit material information, and did not subvert this vital tool to spy on the Trump campaign. 3 negatives, Senator. You wrote that. You signed it. You released it to the press. The eyes stayed on Schiff. 22 months later, Mr. Horowitz issued the IG report. 17 significant errors, material omissions, procedural failures. The FBI had subverted the process, Senator. The Inspector General said so in writing, in a 600-page report with footnotes. A pause. Senator, 22 months. Did you ever, in those 22 months or the 4 years after them, issue a correction, an amended memo, a retraction, a simple sentence acknowledging the IG report contradicted yours? Senator Kennedy, the issues raised by Mr. Horowitz were addressed in subsequent. That's a no, Senator. The sheet went down on the bench. The black folder closed. In Schiff's head, the third calculation began. The first had been about Nebraska. The second had been about how much Kennedy had on him. The third was simpler. It was simpler than the first two combined. This is over. The thought arrived not as panic, not as anger, just as a fact sitting on the inside of his skull, the way a verdict sits on the inside of a courtroom door before the foreman reads it. He had reached in 53 minutes of public hearing the place every prosecutor reaches once or twice in a career. The place where the math of the case stops mattering and the math of survival becomes the only math left. He knew what he was supposed to do now. He was supposed to hold his ground. He was supposed to deliver the closing soundbite. He was supposed to walk out with his head up. He was a Harvard-trained lawyer. He knew how to lose. What he did not know, what nobody in the room except Kennedy knew, and what Kennedy was about to deliver, was that the loss was not yet finished. Mr. Chairman Kennedy said, with the chair's permission, I'd like to invite 3 observers to address the committee briefly. The Republican chairman from Iowa, who had been visibly enjoying the morning since minute 6, nodded. The chair recognizes the witnesses in the 3rd row from the back on the left side. 3 men stood up. The cameras found them. 11 different broadcast feeds. 3 cable trucks, 2 C-SPAN robotic units, 1 MSNBC fixed camera, and approximately 470 phones held up in the audience, all turned in the same half-second to face the 3rd row from the back. The first man was wearing a dark gray suit. He was in his early 50s. His hair was neatly combed. He had the bearing of a man who had been to too many courtrooms to be nervous in another one. He walked to the witness microphone the way a man walks who has done it before, in front of cameras, while his career was being publicly destroyed in the same room. When he reached the microphone, the press section recognized him. A reporter in the 3rd row whispered audibly, "Holy, my name is Carter Page," he said. His voice was calm. His voice had been calm in 2017. It had been calm during the FISA renewals. It had been calm when his career evaporated. It was calm now. I am an American citizen. I served honorably in the United States Navy. I hold a PhD from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. In 2016, I became the target of a FISA warrant based on a document Senator Schiff knew was unverified. That FISA warrant was renewed 3 times. The Department of Justice Inspector General concluded the FISA applications against me contained 17 significant errors and material omissions. I was investigated for nearly 2 years. I was never charged. I was never indicted. I was never arrested. Senator Schiff read the contents of the dossier, much of it about me, into the congressional record. Tens of millions of Americans heard him do it. A small pause. Page looked at Schiff. Schiff was looking at the table. "I would like the Senate and the American people to remember that I am still here." He sat down. The MSNBC reporter in the front row was crying. She was not crying because she felt sympathy for Carter Page. She was crying because she had spent 4 years on television defending the proposition that Carter Page was a Russian agent. She was crying because she had her notes from those broadcasts in her bag at her feet. The second man stood up. He was older, late 50s, thicker build. He walked to the microphone the way a farmer walks towards something he's been meaning to fix. "My name is Devin Nunes," he said. "I am a former member of the United States House of Representatives. I served as ranking member and then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee." The progressive press section, which had been on its feet for 15 seconds at minute 32, was very quiet now. "In February 2018, I released a memo. The memo said the FISA process had been abused. The memo said exculpatory information had been omitted. The memo said the dossier had not been verified. Senator Schiff publicly stated that my memo was, quote, unsupported by the facts and the investigative record. 22 months later, the Department of Justice Inspector General confirmed every material claim in my memo." A pause. Nunes did not look at Schiff. He looked instead at the press section. Senator Schiff has to this day never apologized. He sat down. The third man stood up. He was older, still mid-30s at the time of the events the hearing was about, but the years had been hard. He carried a small leather-bound notebook. He set it on the witness table before he spoke. He did not open it. "My name is George Papadopoulos." A producer in the C-SPAN truck said the words, "Jesus Christ," into his headset. "I served as a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign in 2016. I pleaded guilty in 2017 to one count of making a false statement to FBI agents about the dates of a meeting. I served 12 days in federal detention. The Department of Justice Inspector General later found that the predicate for the FBI's investigation of me was the same dossier Senator Schiff promoted on television for 2.5 years. A pause. Senator Schiff has said on national television that he couldn't have known people were lying to Christopher Steele. I would respectfully like to remind the senator that he had top-secret clearance. He had access to information unavailable to most members of Congress. He chose what to do with that access. A second, pause longer. I did 12 days in a federal facility. Senator Schiff has never spent a day. Papadopoulos sat down. The hearing room was silent. Adam Schiff was looking at the table. His right hand had not left his lapel. In the wings, Sarah Lynn, the communications director who had stopped scrolling at minute 26, was now standing perfectly still, looking at the back of her boss's head with the expression of a woman who had been hired 4 years earlier to manage a senator's image and had just realized in real time that the senator's image was something the senator no longer owned, Senator Kennedy said. The drawl was almost gone again. It was not Oxford. It was not Madisonville. It was the voice of John Kennedy, aged 73, who had been to enough hearings in enough chambers to know exactly how much voice was needed for the moment. You sat in the chairman's seat of the House Intelligence Committee for 4 years. You had top-secret clearance. You had access to sensitive intelligence unavailable to most members of Congress. You used that access to read a fake transcript of a presidential phone call into the record. You used that access to promote a dossier the FBI had already fired its source for lying about. You hired the whistleblower's roommate the day after the phone call. You told the American people on television that you hadn't spoken with the whistleblower while your staff had. You filed 2 false primary residence certifications in 2 states in the same month for 10 years. A pause. And you did all of this, Senator, while sitting in a chamber whose entire purpose is to be the most trustworthy committee in the United States Congress. The drawl took one breath. But that ain't what I want the American people to remember about you, Senator. Houses can be paid back. Tax exemptions can be refunded. Censure resolutions get filed in archives that nobody reads. Those things wash off. The drawl found Schiff's eyes. What don't wash off, Senator, is what you did to the 3 men who just stood up in this room. Mr. Page lost his career. Mr. Nunes was called a Russian asset on the front page of the New York Times for 2 years. Mr. Papadopoulos went to a federal facility. 12 days in a federal facility. His wife had to drive home alone. They lost their savings on legal fees. Mr. Page never got his clearance back. Mr. Page never got his clearance back. Nunes left Congress. Mr. Papadopoulos still can't get a bank loan on account of the federal record. Real men, Senator. Real lives. Real damage that you caused with access to information you knew was wrong. A drawl, beat lower. That ain't a process violation, Senator. That ain't a literary device. That's 3 families, and you owe them more than a press release. The eyes found Schiff one last time. Do you understand why a country lawyer from Louisiana came up here today, Senator? A pause. Do you understand why those 3 men just stood up? Schiff's right hand released the lapel pin. The pin, small gold, the official seal of the United States Senate, polished that morning by the same hotel valet at the Mayflower, who had pressed his suit, fell forward off his lapel. It hung from the small chain still attached to his pocket. It caught the C-SPAN camera light once. It did not return to his lapel. He did not lift his hand to retrieve it. The room knew. Kennedy did not pull out another folder. There were no more folders. There did not need to be. He looked at Schiff directly. The drawl was still there, but the speed had changed. It was the speed of a man reading the verdict, not arguing the case. Senator, 3 questions. I'd like a yes or no answer to each. The hearing room did not move. Question 1. Did you on April 19, 2011 sign a Fannie Mae affidavit certifying that a property in Potomac, Maryland was your primary residence, while at the same time you were claiming a homeowner's tax exemption in California? For a Burbank condo, you also certified as your primary residence, yes or no? The first, second passed. Schiff opened his mouth, closed it. Question 2. Did you on September 26, 2019, read into the congressional record a version of the Trump-Zelensky phone call that contained sentences and phrases that did not appear in the actual declassified transcript, yes or no? The second, third, fourth. Question 3. Were you, as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a man who used his constitutional position of extreme trust, and I'm quoting the censure resolution there, Senator, that ain't my language, that the United States House of Representatives language, to mislead the American people about a presidential phone call, a Russia investigation, a Steele dossier, and a whistleblower whose roommate you hired the day after the call? He folded his hands on the table. Yes or no, Senator? 3 questions, 3 answers. Take your time. The 5th second. The 6th. Schiff looked at his communications director in the wings. She was on the phone. She was not looking at him. The 7th second. The 8th. He looked at the witness chairs. Carter Page was looking back. Page did not blink. The 9th second. The 10th. His right hand drifted toward the fallen Senate pin, stopped halfway, returned to the table. The 11th. The 12th. Schiff looked at the press section. The MSNBC reporter, who 40 minutes earlier had mouthed that the soundbite, was now writing in her notebook. She did not look up. He looked at the Democratic senators on the dais. One was looking at the ceiling. One was looking at her phone. 2 were looking at the table in front of them. None of them was looking at him. He looked at his communications director. She was no longer on the phone. She was watching him. Her expression was the expression of a person who has just realized the statement she has been drafting will not survive contact with the next news cycle. The framing of these questions is fundamentally, yes or no, Senator? The 13th. Schiff said nothing. The 14th second passed. Kennedy nodded once. He closed the 4 folders, one at a time, manila red, navy black. He stacked them evenly in the center of the bench. He pushed the stack 2 inches forward. Mr. Chairman, I yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Page, Mr. Nunes, and Mr. Papadopoulos. They've been waiting a lot longer than 5 minutes. He sat back. The chairman from Iowa, who had been visibly enjoying himself, gavelled the recess at 30 minutes. Schiff stood up. He did not gather his papers quickly. He stacked them once, set them down, stacked them again. The Senate pin remained hanging from his pocket. He did not refasten it. He walked toward the side door, the one Senate staff used, not the public exit. His communications director was already on the phone. The press section could see her drafting a statement. The first 3 words of the statement visible on her screen were this: right wing. At the door, Schiff turned. The cameras turned with him. Kennedy was closing his briefcase. He was not looking up. The microphone in front of him was still hot. Senator Schiff paused at the door. Madisonville was listening too. Schiff did not respond. He left. The door closed behind him with the kind of sound that a heavy door makes when nobody on either side wants to slam it, but nobody wants to soften it either. The aftermath came fast. It came in 3 waves. B11:42 AM. Eastern 3 hashtags occupied the top 3 positions on every American platform. # Pasumbit back at number 1. 5 Lowens 5 Lees at number 2. Madisonville was listening at number 3. The Carter Page clip the moment he said the words, "I am still here," passed 38 million views before sundown. Adam Schiff's communications director released a statement at 1:14 p.m. 12 sentences. 12 sentences. The statement used the word right-wing 4 times, the word distraction 3 times, and the word manufactured twice. It did not mention the Maryland affidavit. It did not mention the September 26th statement. It did not mention Sean Misko. It did not mention Carter Page, Devin Nunes, or George Papadopoulos by name. The Federal Housing Finance Agency asked for comment by the Washington Post, issued a 1-line response from Director William P. The legal referral speaks for itself. The Senate Ethics Committee, in a unanimous bipartisan vote, 2 days later, opened a formal review of Senator Schiff's residency certifications. 3 Democratic senators previously seen as Schiff allies issued statements that, when read carefully, were silent on his defense. A retired federal prosecutor on CNN that afternoon said the line that would be played and replayed for the next 48 hours. In any other context, the Maryland-California discrepancy would already be a wire deception indictment. The only thing protecting Senator Schiff is the United States Senate. John Kennedy declined every interview request. There were by sundown 843 of them. He left the Senate Hart Building through a side entrance at 12:06 p.m. He drove himself to Reagan National Airport. He boarded a Delta flight to Louis Armstrong New Orleans International. The flight landed at 9:40 p.m. Central. He rented a car. He drove an hour and 7 minutes north on Highway 22. He turned off onto a gravel road in Zachary, Louisiana. He pulled into the lot of a small wooden building. The hand-painted sign above the door read Beauregard's Bait and Tackle. Beauregard was sitting on the front porch in a metal folding chair, a glass of sweet tea on the rail. 83 years old, wearing the same denim shirt he'd been wearing since Tuesday. Long flight, Johnny. Long flight, Uncle Beau. Beauregard handed him a glass of tea. He didn't ask about the hearing. He didn't have to. The television in the bait shop was on. It had been on all day. That fella from California, Beauregard, said he ever say a word about the second house. No, sir. That tells you something, don't it? Yes, sir. Beauregard rocked his chair once. Your daddy used to say something about possums. Yes, sir, he did. Said a possum will let a man underestimate him for as long as it takes the man to underestimate himself. Yes, sir. Well, you let him underestimate himself, Johnny. Kennedy drank the tea. Beauregard didn't say anything else for a while. The Chifuncta River ran half a mile to the south. It ran slow in the dark, the way it had been running since long before there was a Congress, a House Intelligence Committee, a Senate Hart Building, a Steele dossier, or a man from Burbank named Adam Schiff. The country lawyer from Madisonville had reminded Washington of something a Senate hearing room had been forgetting for a long time, that a Harvard accent ain't a substitute for a paper trail. The Constitution ain't a costume. And in Louisiana, in a bait shop on the Chifuncta River, they've been keeping receipts since long before the Senate had committees. Beauregard finished his tea. He set the glass on the railing. You stay in for breakfast, Johnny. Yes, sir. Good, your aunt's making biscuits. If you made it this far, you just heard the morning, a country lawyer from Madisonville, Louisiana. A fellow who served 17 years as state treasurer, holds a J.D. from the University of Virginia, and earned a postgraduate diploma at Magdalen College, Oxford. Taught a Harvard Law graduate from Burbank, California, what receipts actually look like. He used 4 folders. He used the truth. He used his daddy-s bait shop wisdom. Smash that like button if you believe a paper trail still beats a press release. Subscribe to this channel because there is more where this came from. Comment possum bit back if you think a Louisiana possum just took down the lead prosecutor of the proceedings against Donald Trump on his own home turf. Share this with the working American in your life. The one who's been waiting 5 years for someone to ask Adam Schiff these exact questions on live television. God bless our veterans. God bless Carter Page, Devin Nunes, and George Papadopoulos. And God bless the country lawyer from Madisonville who still believes that a signed affidavit, a Senate hearing, and a glass of sweet tea can do what cable news has been failing to do for 10 straight years: tell the truth.